This is Casual Babble. Good morning, you beautiful individual. Welcome back to the show and the channel. This is BC Babbles, and you are listening and enjoying, once again, Casual Babble, the Queen City's live cast morning show and podcast coming to you from Race City, USA. Hope you are doing well. Before we hop into today, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're enjoying on YouTube, hit the bell. That way you're notified about all future content on the channel. Plus, be sure to leave us a follow if you're enjoying the show on Podbean. And be sure to check out every episode, which again happens and comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern Time to 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And if you're looking for a way to support the community and the channel, do not forget to check out the Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links, which can be seen in the descriptions of the show. Well, welcome to Wednesday. We are halfway through this week, the first full week of October 2022. And let's be honest, sometimes by the time we get to half the week, we are already ready for the weekend. Super natural, super simple. Work can be trifling sometimes, and the best thing we can do is just do what we can to adjust to the unnecessary stress levels that we've been brought upon for the week, and make sure to, if as efficiently as possible, keep going until Friday 5 p.m. finally gets here. And that's of course for those of us who work the regular 9 to 5 jobs out here. Well, if you're in the chat, hop on in, engage with the show, and let us know where you're coming from. Let us know where you are, how you're doing. Want to make sure we are all connecting as people here before we hop into today's discussion. Now, I wanted to start off with I don't want to say just a memory, but let's be honest, sometimes work memories can be more of a nightmare. So let's touch base today on how we can handle bosses that, whether we like it or not, do not seem to be able to handle the stress levels of their own jobs, and therefore don't cultivate the best atmosphere, because this can happen anywhere. I experienced in the radio industry. You might be experiencing it in your industry, which can be superbly different, but all in all, still not a fun situation, right? So one of my first jobs out of college, I again had a boss who did not know how to handle the stress of her own job, right? So as a result, when things got kind of, I'll use the phrasing, befuddled at work, unfortunately, we could experience some of that backlash. And by we, I mean the group, the team that I worked on, because she had to blame somebody for it. Anyway, I think there were only a couple of times where I thought, you know what, I could quit now. I might be super green. I might not know where I'd go from here, but at this moment, I know for a fact I have zero issues showing this boss that I owe them, and I owe them nothing, right? I think one of the biggest things for me early on into this position, and this can be a tricky, dicey thing, right? Because what is supposed to set you up for success, ideally, in any new work environment, should be an overseer, supervisor, boss who is able to properly instruct you and train you to work as optimally as possible in any kind of office environment. That doesn't always happen, though, and we all know this. So for me in particular, I was brought in officially to handle a particular aspect of the operations, and again, just as a, at the time, part-time employee for this department, but I was brought in under the understanding that starting off, I'd only handle certain kinds of jobs so that, you know, I could get used to part of it first, and then eventually move on to another aspect of the department, and eventually be fully cross-trained. So I am 2 weeks in to this job. I've only worked maybe 4 or 5 days in the first 2 weeks. I was part-time again. And then before I knew it, by the time the end of the second week came around, I was told that I would be covering a full-time individual who handled the other aspect of the department that I had just so barely touched ever. And not only would I be covering a full-time individual, for a position I really hadn't been trained for yet, but I'd be doing so for a full week. So yeah, that was exciting. So obviously the nerves came from the fact that I was not trained nearly to what I should have been on this individual's particular job. And let me acknowledge too that all the full-time individuals, they had essentially the same job, but they all worked for different markets. So the individual I was covering, he was an anchor for traffic anchor, and he covered a couple of different parts of Richmond, Virginia, and a bunch of other smaller areas between North, South Carolina and Virginia. I didn't know these areas at all, and a lot of times when you're talking as an anchor, whether or not you're on TV as a news anchor or you're talking as a traffic anchor, ideally you are familiar enough with the market to know the many different ways in which to call a particular highway or an area, or if there's a preference or preferable name that the locals will know it by. That way they can understand what you're talking about more easily. And I didn't know any of this, on top of having to learn a whole litany of radio intros, segues, and outros, and reading a whole bunch of script that I hadn't been trained on either. So the first week, I won't say was my best, understandably. At the same time, Bossy Boss, who should have made sure I was properly trained for this aspect of the job, had zero issues letting me know when I made a mistake, an understandable mistake. Because again, I had no idea what I was doing, and I shouldn't have been expected to know what I was doing. But yeah, and one of the things I will say almost got her first HR complaint on my third week of work was the fact that during one of my beginner's mistakes, she would come over and she would like poke my shoulder. And I'm like, why are we making physical contact? I know for sure I would not have at any point initiated physical contact with you. Why are you initiating physical contact with me? Almost got her an HR commentary right there, because I was not about being put in a position where I wasn't trained, where I was had unnecessary and unfair expectations about performing in a position I'd not been trained for. And then you have the audacity to initiate physical contact with me. I don't care who your boss is. I don't care how long they've been in an industry. I don't care really anything about the individual. There's no initiating physical contact unwarranted. It's honestly, let's be honest, when it comes to HR, it's even questionable sometimes whether or not an employee should hug their boss, because especially if it's a younger, impressionable employee and the boss is like a veteran in the area and they are so much, and they have a lot of influence, right? It's always dicey. But to have unrequested initiated physical contact, especially in a negative situation, not ideal. Almost got a write-up for her right there, but I blew it off. It's whatever. But yeah, that week was not fun. Unfortunately, I had no choice but to not only quickly adapt to this person's position, but I was quickly asked to start left and right doing full-time employees or covering full-time employees constantly. The number of times I worked full-time weeks, did I just say full-time weeks? But the number of times I covered full-time employees, and sometimes week to week to week, sometimes the same employee back to back, and sometimes multiple employees in a row. For the first 2 years of this job, I couldn't count on two hands because it was so often. After I got that first week of covering this full-time employee of the other part of the department, I barely covered full-time for that department for a while. Thankfully, I eventually became full-time and took a full-time person's position, so I only had to focus on what was now my stuff and didn't have to focus on anyone else's stuff. But another thing that I learned in this position, and I think you'll have seen a lot of people recently talk about it, is that one, which, I mean, I'm happy for me on this because I showed my ability to become very well cross-trained and very adaptable, my adaptability. And literally in time, I think maybe even by the full year I was in this position, I had learned everybody's job, every full-time person's job. Let me define there. And as a result, anytime someone full-time was out, I was the one covering them because I had learned their job some time back. And while I had enjoyed the fact that I was able to display my adaptability and my ability to learn quickly, at the same time, I realized quickly that to a degree, it wasn't really in my best interest because I was never really able to enjoy time off. Every single time I would try to use what free time I would have during the day to focus on my health, focus on my content creation, because I did begin doing reaction videos around this time, any of that, I would immediately get called in, or at least called up, because some part-time wanted to be lazy and not come in, or some full-time just had to randomly decide to take the day off. And of course, I had to be called first. And at the time, I was greener and I didn't really know how to step up for myself. I hadn't yet learned the magic of the word no. At the same time, and this is also another indicator of a very unhealthy, toxic boss, is that I was told by the other employees and by herself that she would happily utilize her connections, network, experience, and influence in the industry to completely destroy what little reputation I had at that time. And for radio, that's a big deal. But ultimately, very, very toxic boss. But yeah, I learned quickly that just because I displayed the ability to be very adaptable, to learn a lot of things back to back to back, did not necessarily ensure that I would enjoy the job more. In fact, it resulted in me being called upon way too often, in my opinion. Firstly, while I was part-time, right? If I'm part-time, then I should only be working part-time hours, to be very, very honest. I'm going to try to make sure to include this creator's link later. It's incredible TikToker. But hashtag act your wage, for real though. Yeah, working as much as I did as a part-time just didn't really suit, especially since I, didn't get full-time pay. I didn't get full-time benefits. So I guess the point of me mentioning that particular aspect of this experience is that be very aware of, if at all, and if so, how much, not commentary. I hate that I blank on these words because they're very important words. Compensation. Be very aware of how much, if any, compensation you'll actually receive by going above and beyond in your job. And a lot of times, unfortunately, there really isn't much at all. And they're really looking for these greener, younger, newer individuals to simply put themselves out there. Which, to a degree, I can respect someone who wants to see their employees go above and beyond. But let's be honest, today, especially in the past few years when this was happening, there really needs to be some kind of incentive, and it really just can't be a potential reputation boost, because that don't pay no bill. It really doesn't, and it really sucks. Another unfortunate experience with this individual, and if you've been with the show since the first episode earlier this year, you'll have heard me talk about it with my very good friend, Amy Abel. She's an amazing individual. I met her actually in this job. She's now over in San Diego enjoying her best life. Hope you're doing really well, Amy. But another experience I had with this very unfortunate boss that I had, and I got two more actually, when I was being called in to cover another full-time individual. And again, I hadn't worked with this individual as part of their version of the job at all. This was my first time on it, and I made a couple of mistakes. And let me just say, when I realized in the most quintessential fashion that this boss could not handle the stress of her own jobs, she called me into her office, already very, very upset. So I knew this wasn't going to be a fun conversation. The way she blew up and used every curse word in the book at me for messing up as though I've been working at this job for years instead of months. Yeah, that wasn't great. I've F-bomb, like H-bomb, B-bomb, every single one that no boss should be throwing at a part-timer who's barely trained and who's making understandable mistakes should ever do. And if you ever experience anything like that, that should be a massive red flag to you, because this individual should have heard what was happening, come over to me, the employee, asked me what the dissonance was in a professional manner, with the displaying the ability to handle the stress of her job, as she should be able to, because she's the boss. Do that and see what she can do in the moment to help me. Because here's the thing, I knew she wasn't doing very much when she wasn't in our faces about stuff, because of the number of times I would walk in and find her on Candy Crush. Okay, so let's not pretend that she was doing really important stuff before she got some nasty phone calls from other individuals who also couldn't handle the stress of their job. She should have done that. She should have come over to me very professional and be like, hey, I see this is happening. What can I do to assist? That's what a boss should be doing, instead of calling you into their office and completely ragging on you in the most malicious way. And what was more embarrassing about that is that her office in this building was right next to the sales pit. And I didn't realize it then, but in the future, when she kind of went off like that again on somebody else, and how clearly I could hear this unfortunate conversation between her and whoever it was, I realized that back in the day when that happened to me, how clearly this sales team would have heard that entire thing go down. Unbelievably embarrassing. So really, regardless of what I thought or not, my reputation then was very much being doled out in a very, very negative way. And then I think another point that really showed me that I should have left a lot earlier than I did was still full-time. When you're full-time with this particular boss, and I'll do her the favor of not mentioning her name, though I don't owe her that much. But the way that us part-times knew when to do, and I think this is with most jobs really, is that we get a schedule, right? So there was a day, and again, this is the particular story that I mentioned with Amy Abel, so go back and check out episode 1 if you haven't. Pretty funny. But the schedule that I had for a particular, I think it was like a Monday, I was not scheduled to be active or to come in and take care of any job until the afternoon that day, which is like 3 o'clock. So I'm sleeping in on a Monday. Who wouldn't enjoy that opportunity, right? And so I'm sleeping in. I think it's around maybe 6:30 when I get woken up by a phone call from a very angry boss. And I'm kind of surprised it went that long, because the morning shift for this department, when you're working the morning shift, is 5 a.m. So yeah, so I get woken up from a phone call by a very angry boss, and she is ragging on me like, where the hell are you at? What the hell are you doing? Why aren't you in the office? And me, barely out of REM sleep, I'm trying to be like, whoa, like this is a lot of stuff happening like right off the bat at 6:30 in the morning. I like, what's the situation? And so she's telling me that I'm supposed to be in the morning. I tell her based off my memory, like, look, I'm not scheduled for the morning at all. And I wasn't asked to come in for the morning. And she's telling me that I'm most absolutely scheduled for the morning, and I should have been in the office an hour and a half ago. And so while she's blowing off, because she is able to just go off for minutes at a time and probably become like half unconscious while she does it, I'm going into my email, I'm going into my schedules, the most recent schedule I can pull up that was sent out probably by the end of the last week, and looking for myself on that date. And sure enough, the schedule that I had mentioned that I was not supposed to be coming in that day until the afternoon around 3 o'clock. And I tell her, I find a moment for her to like, where she's like taking a breath in the middle of her rant. And I'm telling her, hey, boss, the schedule that I have does not have me on today. So I'm sorry that there's a confusion here, but it's not on my end. What I have says this. Like, and I'll send you a screenshot of what I have and when this schedule was sent. Which she's like, I don't care about that. I don't care about that. You're supposed to be in this morning, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, I don't know what's happening here. I don't see that. And of course, me being the green person that I was, and again, at this point, not having learned how to defend myself in a more heavier manner, was like, look, I'll touch base with the team. Actually, you know what? I forgot a big thing about that conversation. So while she's ranting, after I've looked up my schedule, I text Amy, who's in, as she's a full-time in the same department. And I said, hey, can you pull up the latest schedule that you have from Bossy Boss and see what it says about me today? And sure enough, Amy confirms, I'm not scheduled to be until the afternoon. So why this lady is calling me at 6:30 in the morning to completely lose herself on, like, to lose like her mind at me, is completely blanking to me at the moment. And I tell her as well, both I see that the schedule says what I told her it says, and two, one of the full-times in the department just confirmed with me that the schedule we have says what it says what I said it says. And so anyway, after letting her blow off some more steam, because what else am I going to do? She hangs up. I reach out to Amy to get like a gauge of what the issue is in the morning. Turns out that Bossy Lady did have a new schedule in which I would have come in the morning that she did not send out. We love that. We really do. And so I was like, okay, so what's the situation? What's the problem? Which triggered her awareness for this morning. And I was told that one of the other cross-trained, heavily reliable part-times was in there. He was trying to cover a producer and an anchor at the same time, which is just not a feasible thing to do for the most part, because the anchors have a lot of different breaks they have to do per hour, and the producers are constantly creating reports, so they really can't be hopping back and forth, right? So I was like, okay, fine. So I told them, you know what, just have the part-timer stick to being the anchor, because I don't have the equipment at home to be an anchor, so let's just have them hop over there, because like that's the only thing I can do right now. And then I'll hop on at home on my home computer, and then I'll handle the producing from here. Totally fine. And then you'd think a professional boss who has been shown that they just had a big uh-oh moment, like a big yikes moment, because they messed up, would have the maturity, especially as long as this person's been in the industry, to come in and provide a necessary and understandable apology for messing up as they did. No, got nothing like that. Got no singular moment of an, oh, I'm so sorry, yada, 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 whatever. Got none of it. I should have left that day knowing how valuable I was to the department. But again, greener, didn't know how to stand up for myself. But had I done that, I would have rocked this witch's blocks off without question. Because why not? What do I owe you at that point? Very, very toxic boss. More than happy to have left as many years ago as I did, because there was no growing in that department. And sometimes that's something we have to recognize, is when the environment we enter is not as hospitable for growth as we'd like it to be. And another reason for me wanting to leave the company, well, I had many reasons to leave that company, but another issue I had with the department as a whole, on top of the not ideal boss, was the fact that when it comes to most structures or corporations, usually every department has some kind of day-to-day relationship with other ones, because it's a system. Every department connects or does something for another, and it all kind of feeds together in this kind of loop, right? This department didn't do that. Literally, the department had so little, if any at all, day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month engagement with other departments, other teams, that we were like the anomaly team of the entire building. We would, like, if there was like a luncheon that day at work, like someone had a banquet going on, if any of us from my team showed up amongst the other peoples, they'd be like, oh, wow, traffic people. Like we were some kind of anomaly of nature that typically doesn't come out of the woods or something like that. So another big thing that I would say look out for when you're entering a new environment, one, touch base with people who've been there, get a gauge for one, how the relationships between the team and the supervisors seem to be. Try to get, if you haven't already through the interview process, get a gauge of the supervisor's temperament, how well any non-ideal situations seem to be handled typically between the team and the supervisor. And, honestly, do what you can and as quietly as you can to find out if there's any kind of favoritism that goes on, because there was favoritism with this boss as well, which I could definitely get into. See, again, if the boss historically has displayed the professional and mature ability to handle the stress of their own job in such a way where they can handle their workload, but also productively and constructively assist their less than ideally performing employees to do better, right? And also, again, see if there's any kind of day-to-day relationship between the department you're working for and the others. Because if you realize that you come into a corporation, a company, in a position that probably won't benefit you as much as you initially hoped it would, then one really good way to go about finding other ways to move around, move on, is to network with the other departments. Get to know people outside of that team, because if there's ever an opening somewhere else and you realize, oh, that's the job that will take me from here to here, knowing people in that department can really help you out. Networking is everything when it comes to really, I think, any kind of most industry, not just radio and broadcasting, but any corporate, any kind of whether or not it's food services or textile industry, whether really any kind of industry, networking can be such a huge tool in your toolbox. So don't forget to do that. Now, in my case, where the company or the department that I was in had no day-to-day relationship with other departments, I had to make sure to take it upon myself in my free time to go and network. Now, what made it kind of easy for me as a part-timer especially is that because I was covering the full times usually, the full times worked the rush hours because it's traffic, right? So typically the full times would come in, work the morning rush 5 to 9, then come back in the afternoon and work 3 to 6:30-ish. And so that gave me a whole lot of midday time to stay in the building. I didn't have to leave. Stay in the building, go meet up with other departments, people that I knew in other departments, to network some more, kind of get a gauge on the activity that was happening, and see if there was any kind of upcoming opportunity that I could look into, just to see if there was a way for me to move out of the position I was in. Because again, and I think I mentioned this either last episode or last week, that I learned nothing in that department for 3 years. The only reason I had any production skills coming out of that company was because friends of mine, Amy included, also Jasmine, who's been on the show in past episodes, we took the time out of our schedules after hours to hang out in the production studios and to come up with some kind of extracurricular projects that helped us keep our production skills up to snuff. If we hadn't done that, I'm not sure I'd be able to do this today if I hadn't taken the initiative to develop myself in my free time back in the day, which would have sucked, right? So yeah, always try to get a gauge of how the team works with the supervisor's temperament. Can they handle the stress of their own job? And if they can, are they still able to be constructive and productive with you? And if they can't, are they at least able to make sure that they don't allow that stress that they have, outpour onto their employees and cause a really negative atmosphere among their teams? Very important things to know. And again, if you do gauge those things and you realize maybe where you are is not going to be the place you want to stay, make use of whatever day-to-day interdepartment communications or activities that you can to make sure that those things are not going to hold you back in the long run, that you can move on if you have to, find a new position, and then go amongst your merry way. All right, so enough about me and my negative nightmare stories. Let's go ahead and move on to some of this morning's submissions and see what we can give some advice on this morning. So let's see here. I've got one that says you gotta love group. Loathe. Very important difference in words. Gotta loathe group check-ins. So let's see here. I'll make this brighter. Okay, there we go. Okay. So gotta loathe group check-ins. Anyone else feel a little stressed when a group of 35 plus people arrive to check in and the only one staff member is you? Yeah, it's been one of those evenings. A large group that management have known for at least a few weeks. I will say for future submissions, make sure that the grammar's on point, please, so I can read this live. Okay. A large group that management have known for at least a few weeks, if not longer. There's some sort of media production crew. FDM left at 5 p.m. On his way out the door said I should check the guests in before they arrive. So all I had to do was to take a name, give them their envelope with room key, and note down their car registration number. What actually happened was I got distracted by other guests already in-house needing the usual towels, queries about what options were included on their booking, an extra chair needed for a room, so less than halfway through the list of guests who were part of the group booking. Most of them turned up all at the same time, so I had a queue of the 35 plus people literally trailing out of the entrance door while I was trying to keep my calm and hand out envelopes, check in the ones I hadn't yet gotten to, deal with the 10 or so who didn't want to be above the gym because of the noise, and being real Karens about the fact that I couldn't kick someone else out of a different room so they could have a room instead in order to be further away. So yeah. Took the best part of 2 hours before things quieted down again. Really am feeling like I'm getting a bad case of leavers karma now. Just wondering what else will kick off between now and the end of my last shift on Friday. So definitely understand group check-in. So I was a concierge in the past. Hospitality is not my preferred industry. Because the people that I experienced seem to forget that I was not their servant, but I was there to assist them. Very big difference, right? But yeah, totally get like a group check-in. I think one of the worst experiences, and I had it happen more than once, was people trying to check in to a new unit, and asking, when they could have the loading dock. Now, the loading dock, of course, is something that typically is going to be on a schedule, right? And if you're smart and you're moving into it and you're moving into a new place at a certain date, at a certain time, the smart thing to do would be to ask the concierge or the management team how they could go about scheduling you beforehand, so that you definitely could have access to the loading dock, right? So yeah, a number of different times I had a group of people checking in, and they waited until the moment they walked in to check in to move in to ask me about the loading dock, which of course typically was not available. Big building, lots of units, lots of back and forth, people moving in, moving out, and there was no way to make sure that all those assets were available for them. So try to be smarter, people. Come on, let's not be too picky. And remember, concierge is there to assist, not to serve. So if something doesn't go your way because you weren't proactively smart, it's not their fault. Just saying, okay? All right, let's see here. Let's see. New submission. Let's see here. Gotta love it when the computer moves just a little slow in the morning. Let's see here. All right, this one says, I'm not ready. Love that. All right, working at the front desk, we all know what it's like to get a call, only for the person on the other end to have absolutely no idea. Oh, we talked about this last week. I forgot to mark this out. My bad. One moment. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. In the meantime, if you are wondering how you can submit your story for the show, go ahead and check out. I can do it a couple of different ways for you to submit your questions, your stories, or your own bit of office gossip. So one way to do that is to head on over to casualbabble.com. There is a page called Submit Your Story. With this, you can be anonymous or use your name, totally your call, but you can submit your story or your question or your bit of office gossip, and my admin on there will let you know when your submission will be used on the show. Similarly, you can also head over to Reddit. We have our own community called Talk Office Gossip. Submit your story there, and again, my admin will let you know when the submission is going to be used on the show. Now, just in case you're wondering, if the submission isn't used on the show, it will be used in the future newsletter of Casual Babble, which comes out monthly. Now, you want to make sure that you are signed up to be on the mailing list for that Casual Babble newsletter, and you will see your submission in the advice column section, which I'll be putting in there as well. And the next newsletter does come out in a couple of weeks. The last one came out a week and a half ago, so be sure to sign up for the mailing list today. Just go to the home page of casualbabble.com. It's right below the main picture there. All right, so the next one's going to be called Sick and Tired of Sexual Harassment Calls. I already agree, so let's hop into this one. I am the full-time auditor of a motel with a very high electric bill due to not turning the lights off. Have been going on 4 years, and boy, has it been wild. For the most part, I love my job, but being a female with a peppy-sounding voice means I tend to get a lot of pervy calls. Yeah. Last night, Sunday, a man calls saying he is stuck in his car in the parking lot and proceeds to say, I can't get out because my wow is so hard. Now, usually I just hang up, but I am at the tail end of a bad cold and haven't been able to sleep well all week because coughing and my new neighbor's dog barking off and on all day. In my chirpiest voice, I said, oh, no, sir, don't worry, I can help you with that. He gets all excited saying, really? How? Well, sir, I have a nice sharp box cutter at the desk here. Don't worry, I'll be right out. You'll never have to worry about this happening again. I love that energy. Let's see here. He completely lost it, saying that I was rude and had no right to talk to him like that. Really? Let's see here. I dropped the perky voice and said, no, sir, that is rude. What's rude is you calling my workplace here where I have to answer the phone and daring to speak to me that way. Called my GM who lives on the property and told her, just warning you, might get a complaint about me in the morning, and told her word for word what he said. Well, she's in the middle of a cold too and laughed so hard she started coughing and wet her pants. Wow, quite the cold. I absolutely love this GM. She totally has our backs, and if we refuse to rent to someone or someone is rude, verbally abusive, and she is really willing to back us up. She has actually put people on the DNR for verbal abusive staff. Do not reserve. Do not something. It is a big change from our old GM who would just roll over and actually told me, you work in the service industry. You just have to get used to people like that and smile. Hate that. But love that you have a new GM who actually has your backs. Did not have a great GM when I was in hospitality, unfortunately. But I love this energy. The response is awesome. Yeah, honestly, if in hospitality, take any opportunity you can to let the residents or the people who are coming to stay know that you are there to assist, not there to roll over and play doll or like anything like that. You don't owe any of them nearly that much. And if I wish someone had the audacity to make a call like that to one of my coworkers while I was there, and what I would have like quickly typed up for them to respond to would have been a lot harsher. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Thankfully, a lot of companies like this do record the calls, so that if there's any kind of like, if this guy were to dare to attempt any kind of lawsuit, well, we have your pervy call right here in, normalized and compressed audio. So it's not like you can argue your way out of this lawsuit. So yeah, love the energy. Keep it going. I love that. That was so good. All right, moving on to the next one. Let's see here. Let's see. Boss asked me to take sick time for weekly therapy appointments. My job is a hybrid schedule where I work 2 days remotely. In the summer, I asked my boss if I could specifically work remotely on Thursdays, as I have a virtual therapy appointment at 5 o'clock. She denied the request and told me to take sick time to make the appointment. She accommodates all the other employees who are mothers with young children or caregivers for their parents, but would not budge on giving me Thursdays remote. Instead, she has chosen my 2 remote days to be any day except for Thursdays, which seems a little petty. There isn't a reason for this there isn't a reason so this genuinely other than that she wants to exercise her power. I've struggled and I am diagnosed with PTSD, depression, and anxiety. Therapy has been really helpful in keeping things manageable for me. I can't change the appointment because my therapist is so booked up. Is there something disability services at my company can do, or is this worth bringing up to HR? I say HR, I can't speak on the disability services of the company. That's definitely what you'll have to hop into. But HR for sure. I mean, therapy, and nowadays it's you hear about it all the time, but it's so important to make sure that you are mentally healthy enough to be able to operate at work wherever you are. And if this is the only option that you have, and plus if you have all this other inconsistencies with your boss, that's definitely an HR call. Therapy is so important these days. There's really no reason for you to have to miss out, especially if again, you have been diagnosed with PTSD, depression, or anxiety. Those things need to be given priority, so again, that you can work optimally. And it sounds like you have been working as efficiently as possible, while also putting in the proper time to make sure that you are taking care of your mental and emotional health, which I think is very professional, very mature. And again, the way that these things lined up with your boss, who chose any day but Thursdays, the only time you can get your therapy session, seems very petty. And so I definitely think that is a definite reason to go down the HR tunnel and see what can be done there. Very petty in my opinion. And there we go. All right. Next submission. I shut down a member who tried throwing their status at me. Love it. All right. I work at a blah blah hotel. Okay. And I get really annoyed when people tell me their membership level in an attempt to get better treatment or perks. So this guy called and said he had questions about his reservation. Me, no problem. No problem. How can I help? Him, well, you need my number so you can look up my status. Me, rolls eye. Not at all, sir. What questions do you have? Him, well, I wanted to know if I can check in early. Me, as long as we have an empty room available, we will definitely check you in early. Him, well, would I be able to check in or not? I'm a high-level member status. Usually they would ask me what my status is, then tell me yes. Me, sir, once you come to our hotel, we will check anyone in early as long as there's an empty room, regardless of any status you may have. Him, pauses. Well, okay, I will make my reservation then. Me, gives the usual anything else, hope to see you soon, bye. Note, I really put emphasis on the anyone. I was happy that his tone sounded less entitled afterward. Same here. If you have policies that treat all members of a club the same way, there's no way for you to remind them that their status only gets them so many benefits or perks. And, you always want to do it in a very professional manner. When it comes to people who are able to afford going to a club like that, you're definitely going to be seeing a lot of snobs. It's just the just the groove of those kind of people, unfortunately. But yeah, all you did is your job. You mentioned the policies, which includes everyone. It doesn't give anyone a preference or preferential treatment. Totally good on your part. Love that. Keep doing what you're doing. Alrighty, let's see here. Ooh, okay. So HR wants to reduce my hourly wage since I'm now eligible for benefits. Don't love that. All right, I currently work part-time for a large multinational corporation. Don't like that. Well, don't like the title plus that information. Sorry. I receive an hourly wage. I negotiated this when I started the job a year ago for an amount I thought was fair given I was entitled to benefits other employees had. I have a very unique job. There is nobody in the company that can do the work I do, leverage, and I'm not aware of any other part-time employees in the company. By increasing my hours above 20 hours per week, I am now automatically entitled to medical benefits package, have access to a company co-sponsored defined contributions, pensions. God, wow, this wording this morning. Okay, by increasing my hours above 20 per week, I'm now automatically entitled to a medical benefits package, have access to a company co-sponsored defined contributions pension plan. Wow. And a bonus based solely on our parent company's performance. This is good news, which it is. And part of the reason why I wanted to increase my hours was so I could get these benefits in addition to a generous hourly wage. HR is coming back and asking me to take up to a 20% hour pay cut to reduce my total compensation package. They are suggesting if I take a pay cut, it will still be ahead of my current total compensation. Other points they mentioned, they aren't accounting for inflation, and I also wasn't eligible for the annual company-wide pay increase after 1 year, thus my purchasing power is already about 8% lower than when I started. And another point, obviously the bonus is not guaranteed. They claim it has never been paid less than 70% of max. Is this a normal request? It's probably a normal request, but it's not a fair request. Firstly, not an upgrade, but a promotion should be a promotion. And again, you're part-time, so they really need to be working with there are so many laws in place that are very, very harsh and specific about compensation. If you're still part-time status and they're working you beyond part-time hours, they need to only be offering you those medical benefits and pension benefits without taking anything away, because that's a very dangerous stance for them. I would definitely not agree to the pay cut. There's zero reason for you to do so. You've already mentioned that currently you are the only known part-time individual who's able to perform the duties that you perform, which is your leverage for the company. Like, look, if you won't treat me fairly, then either make me full-time, not part-time anymore, or I will go do this somewhere else. Never lose sight of your value, especially when you, again, seem to be very unique in your job for a company. They shouldn't be trying to take any opportunity to slight you by giving you a pay cut. You know, you're part-time, you're being worked over part-time hours, which automatically puts you in a position to get more as you deserve to be. So no, don't take the pay cut. Even if it's a normal request for companies like that, it's not a legal one likely. So definitely make sure to touch base with HR, reach out to legal, see if this is happening, or, look for another opportunity, because again, you're in a position where you got leverage. And at this point, I would definitely consider using it. So keep that in mind. All right, I believe we got time for one more submission this morning. Okay, let's hear. Renegotiating vacation time after a company-wide increase. I started a new job this year and negotiated 4 vacation weeks, which is 1 week extra over the baseline of 3 weeks. Now, HR is rolling out 4-week baseline vacation for everyone, which renders my negotiation pretty pointless. Pretty fair. Does anyone have any advice on how I can present my case to have 5 weeks vacation instead, since I originally negotiated a week extra over baseline? basically I want to maintain my +1, but since I am not technically losing anything, I would like some help in articulating my argument. So I would say one of the kind of arguments I would expect in asking for an extension or for additional vacation time would probably be someone stating that it's not feasible or there's not enough bandwidth for the company to compensate for that extra time off. But if the company just as a whole increased the baseline for how much vacation someone gets, that means that their bandwidth has increased. So I would make sure to keep that in mind for any kind of like retort against the idea of providing you an additional week of vacation time. But otherwise, I think it's pretty straightforward. They've increased the baseline, so there's really, and bring it back up to your manager. You've already agreed to have one above everyone else, which they seem to have agreed on. So there should be really no feasible reason for them to say, no, you can't do that. For whatever reason, if they were into it before, there should be no reason for them to not be down for it again. And I think as long as, you're able to plan your vacation time around important projects, make sure that you are getting your, kind of mental health time to relax and recuperate while being able to be available when possible for good projects and whatnot. You should be pretty good. Again, the company has clearly increased its bandwidth of what it can handle for employees taking off for vacation. And you've already been, you and your supervisor have already agreed to acknowledge this extra time already. So yeah, I think just a pretty straightforward question about it. You should be good to go. Otherwise, so you're in pretty good shape at the moment. Well, thank you so much for enjoying Casual Babble this morning with me. I really appreciate you guys hanging out. This live stream will be available pretty much immediately on YouTube. Check it out if you came into the show late. In the meantime, I hope you have a great day.